Edwin, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on the Parables, man. Like we were talking about earlier before the recording, man. Just the fact that I like to stay away from doing remote because of what I got here, and for you to drive from your home in Hollywood to come here, it means a lot. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's an honor to be here.
Dude, thank you.
Love what you're doing with the show. So
Thank
thanks
you
for having me.
Oh, no worries. Thank you so much. So, we met through Sam. At
Yes, good old
Sam's,
Sam. Yeah.
met through Sam. Shout out to Sam Bakhtiar, and we were having some interesting conversations in his kitchen, and I just loved everything that you were talking about. And we actually have a lot of mutual friends. I've had a lot of people that on this canvas that have been on here.
Yeah, I'm
and
loving it.
and again, I'm just humbled and blessed that you're here, man. I feel like this is gonna be a good one for sure, man.
Yeah, no,
Not to put
definitely.
any pressure on you or anything like that.
We'll make it happen, man. We'll make it happen.
Yeah, so listen, again, this podcast again is about, I like to call it actually as a vessel for positive influence and positive energy.
Cool.
Anything that people can take away from our conversation, they could use it and, just become the best version of them, and I know you have an incredible story. You have you've been through a lot, and just everything that you speak about and you talk about, man, I love it. And I know so many people can find value out of it. So I wanted to kind of dive in and obviously let people know who you are and get to know you. Yeah. I know you've been on a few podcasts before, but I can assure you that there's a whole different audience with the parables.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get to know you. So I know you have an interesting story. You're originally not from here, and let's just take it off from there.
Yeah, so I was born in Bogota, Colombia.
Mm-hmm.
I came to the United States when I was 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, 2 weeks after coming to the U.S., our home gets raided by law enforcement for suspicion of drug trafficking.
So this is Escobar era, kind of?
Yeah,
Okay.
pretty much.
Okay.
And then both my parents end up in jail that day.
Oh,
my sister and I end up in a foster home.
Okay.
And then about 8 months later, my parents get acquitted of all charges. They get released. Now my sister and I are thinking that the nightmare is over.
Mm-hmm.
However, the nightmare was just beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You see, every year after that, for the next 4 years, our home would get raided by law enforcement.
Yeah.
And finally, on that 4th year, they were able to arrest my dad, and this time they were able to put him away for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
The cops were nice enough to allow me to speak to him that day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, before they took him in. And his last words to me were like, "Son, you need to become the man of the house, and you need to take care of this family." And he was my hero, so of course I took those words to heart, and I promised him that I would.
How old were you?
I was 10 years old at the time.
Man.
And now I had additional siblings. I had 2 more siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad did leave us some money. But unfortunately, 2.5 years after that, we just ran out of money.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to move to a city called Huntington Park,
Okay.
which is in southeast LA. It's not to be confused with
Huntington Beach.
Two polar opposites.
Yeah,
cities.
definitely.
And at first we thought everything was okay. We rented a 3-bedroom apartment, but then 3 months after that we ran out of money again.
And this is all your siblings too?
Yeah.
Everyone?
My siblings, mother, and I.
Okay.
And 3 months into it, we ran out of money, so now we had to rent out 2 of the bedrooms in the 3-bedroom apartment. So now my siblings, mother, and I were left to sleep in this tiny little room.
Mm-hmm. All together.
So as you can imagine, it was crammed. It wasn't the best living situation. It was dirty. I still remember roaches waking me up in the middle of the night. And I just remember, though, at that point, becoming obsessed with making $100,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, if I could just make $100,000, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to make $100,000 a year, because if I do that, I can help my family out. And then the other thing that was very important around that time was my mom's love and faith. And
yeah, definitely.
Every night she would pray over me, and she would tell me that I had greatness in me, and that God was going to use me to help a lot of people, and He was going to, and I was going to be very successful. Mm-hmm. And one day I'd be on a stage where I could speak about Him. And she literally would repeat that over and over to me.
Funny how that happened, right?
Yeah, right. So, but that was important to me, because at a very young age, I began to feel that I was blessed, and I began to believe that God was with me.
Yeah.
So it gave me the confidence that I needed every time I went after my dreams to sort of fight off the resistance that comes when you go after your dreams, the darkness that comes with going after your dreams. So I always talk about, the first step of developing an unstoppable mindset is you have to have some faith, because if you're ever going to go after your dreams, you're probably going to have to take on some God-sized challenges. And when you take on challenges like that, self-sufficiency is no longer an option. And it's at that point that you better believe in a higher power to give you that confidence that you'll need when you're going through those dark days of resistance. And
you were the oldest, right, of the siblings?
Second oldest. My sister at the time was my sister was older. Yeah, so an older sister and two younger brother and sister.
Language barrier, I would imagine, when you first kind of came, and how was it kind of just getting, going into a new country? I would imagine a lot of fear, uncertainty.
Oh, of course. Fear. I remember the first day of kindergarten. I was crying all day because I didn't understand anyone. Everyone was blonde, blue-eyed, and I was this like outsider kind of deal.
Yeah.
My mom, God bless her heart, she just didn't know much about it. She had the language barrier as well. So I actually was an ESL until the 8th grade, and I had to get myself out of ESL, which is English as a second language.
I
think they call it something else. But that had an effect on me because after I got out of ESL, it was hard for me to catch up. I didn't really understand things. So at a very young age, I just didn't think I was very smart. And that sort of stuck with me for a while.
Yeah, because you're young. Yeah.
And, but yeah, so, back to the faith thing, one of the things that I love to talk about, if you can just look at life through faith, gratitude, love, and abundance versus fear, hate, anger, and scarcity, you're going to do very, very well. And gratitude alone, gratitude won't change your current situation, but it will change your heart. And when you have gratitude in your heart, you can be angry and you can't be worried. When you have gratitude in your heart, you just have love in your heart. And when you have love in your heart, you're going to want to serve people.
It changes your perspective, for sure. Yeah.
It changes your perspective.
Yeah.
And then you're going to want to serve people. And the thing is, when you serve people, you're going to influence people. And when you influence people, then you'll be able to lead people. And when you lead people, then you'll be able to change lives.
Love that, yeah.
So that gratitude's been huge for me. I practice that every morning. It's the first thing I do when I wake up is I ask myself 7 powerful questions, which are, what am I happy about? What about it makes me happy? How does it make me feel? So every question I ask that 3-part question. So it's what am I happy about? What am I excited about? What am I grateful for? What am I proud for? What am I proud of? What am I enjoying? What am I committed? And who loves me and who do I love?
Yeah.
And then again, the second part of that is what about it makes me feel that way, and how does it make me feel?
Yeah. It's more than just kind of identifying it.
You have to kind identifying it. Yeah. And it works wonders because you'll literally forget about things. It's happened to me where I've had my best day in company history, and the next day I woke up like just in a bad mood. But now I recognize whenever I'm in a bad mood, I'm like, wait a minute, go to gratitude.
Yeah.
So why am I happy? And then I started to have to think about what I was happy about. And it reminded me, holy crap, I had the best day yesterday in the entire history of Skyline security.
Yeah, so why am I all like...
I had literally forgotten it, right? And then just changed my perspective. And I do that every morning. It's the first thing I do when I wake up is I open my eyes, I start asking these questions.
It sounds like it brings you back to that place of, again, like you're fortunate to have everything around you. And, just really appreciate everything that's in front of you already. Yeah.
And those things will change. Like today I woke up, what am I excited about? And I'm excited to go meet Ejay. And
Let's go.
That's literally what I thought.
Yeah.
And it got me excited about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love that stuff.
Yeah. And, so it sounds like, going back to your story, so it definitely sounds like faith was definitely a huge part of your journey. What about people... this might be a hard question to answer. What about people who maybe are not so much into faith? Is there, you think, a possible way, just from your experience in the leadership role and all that stuff and everything you've been able to accomplish, is there some way to build that self-confidence also?
Yeah, and I mean, people have different higher powers, right?
Yeah.
So Some people, it might be the universe. Whatever it is, that's why I say you find your higher power, whatever it is, right? So give you that extra confidence. But let's just say you didn't have one, period.
Yeah.
Then putting yourself in circumstances that demand more than you think you are worth. And then when you succeed at those circumstances, then you will automatically build a new self-worth. And the reason that's important is because you could only receive what your mind can accept. So in many ways, you almost have to trick your mind into making it think that it deserves more, right? So a quick example for me is at a very young age, I got a job selling long distance over the telephone. So I was basically a telemarketer.
Okay.
And at 15 years old, I decided to go for the manager position. And I was a very shy and timid kid, so this was like the worst possible job for me.
Yeah.
But after being rejected at my last 13 interviews, I realized that this was my only shot. And remember how I said I have to figure out a way to make $100,000 a year?
Yeah.
My goal was bigger than any excuse I made to myself on why I couldn't do it. And even though I was the youngest employee at the company, everyone in my department was 18 to 40 years old, going to college with way more education than I had. I still said, I'm going to go for it.
You're like, screw it, right?
I'm going to go for it, even though the likelihood of me failing is very, very high.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is most people wouldn't have even tried because they don't want to deal with the failure. But what they don't realize is that on the other side of fear is the biggest gift you can receive other than faith, which is building your self-worth. See, you're only going to build your self-worth if you put yourself in uncertainty. And every time I've put myself in uncertainty is where God has met me.
Yeah, I love that.
That's where that high power, right?
Yes.
Because think about it. If you're always taking the easy route, or the things that you know about, you're basically at that point don't need God.
It's not serving you almost.
It's not serving you. It's just it's so easy for you. Like, what do you need it for, right? And it's almost like when you take on these risks, you have to believe in something, right?
Yeah.
So those two things for me are huge. You again, the faith, but then also believing in yourself. And the only way you'll believe in yourself is by, again, putting yourself in circumstances that demand more than you think you are worth.
Yeah.
And when you succeed at those situations, you will develop a new self-worth. So what came out of me, out of that situation I put myself in, by 18 years old, I became the manager of about 40 people.
Wow.
I started to make $1,000 a week, and I became the right hand of the VP of sales. And I was also the youngest manager in company history. So now my mind began to accept that I deserved more.
Yeah.
Because I didn't see any other 18-year-old at that time accomplishing the things that I was accomplishing. So even though I wasn't making $100,000 a year yet, I was making $52,000 a year. I started to believe in my heart that I was worth $100,000.
Like you belong there, and you can move forward, and you can reach that 100,000.
Right.
Yeah.
And the only way you'll believe something in your heart, and if you're taking notes, write this down, is by experiencing it. Because you could say you're worth $100,000 a year all day long. There's a difference between saying it and believing it in your heart.
Definitely, yes.
The only way you'll believe something in your heart is by experiencing it. The only way you'll experience something like that is by putting yourself in uncertainty, right? And that's the only way. And that's why at a very young age, at that point, I was like, I believed in my heart that I was worth it. And then because of that, 3 years later, when I was making $70,000 a year, this is back in 1999. So now I'm 21 years old, and I'm making $70,000 a year. That same VP that was a friend of that I'd become his right hand, he basically comes into my office and says, Edwin, I'm going to resign.
Oh, man.
And I want to start this home security company. And I want you to come help me build it. He says, I can't guarantee you the $70,000 a year that you make here. But if you make this work, you're going to double, triple, quadruple what you make here. And the first thing I thought was, man, this guy's making $250,000 a year and he's resigning he must be pretty serious about the opportunity.
Like, I better listen, right?
I better listen, right? And the second thing I thought was, man, if this guy is willing to teach me how to start a company from the ground up, I'm like, this is my shortcut to college.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is I was a big dreamer, man. I was that kid that would ditch fifth and sixth period, and that's probably why I ended up with a 1.8 GPA when I graduated, right? But I literally would go to Rodeo Drive, and I would window shop. And I was a big Pretty Woman fan, so I just loved that area. And then I would go to the homes, and I would literally spend hours looking at homes with views. And I just started to say, one day, I'm going to live here. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to be here. And that was huge for me. That's what I call touching the dream. At the time, I didn't know what I was doing, but now that I look back and I study mindset, I'm like, wait a minute, I was touching the dream.
Visualization. Yeah.
And touching the dream got me excited about wanting to work my butt off. Touching the dream got me out of my bubble of Southeast LA. It made me realize that $70,000 a year back then, which was a lot back then, in 99, wasn't really much, right? Because where I was living, it was a lot. And I could have easily said, man, this is as good as it's going to get. And the minute you say that, then that's when you stop growing. And in life, you never want to stop growing. You want to
complacency.
You want to continue to grow. And that was tremendous for me as I look back.
There's a couple things I want to touch on I think are very important. One is, so what I got was definitely what you did was you were aiming high. You started to aim high because then put yourself in a sense of urgency to demand more of yourself. And then also the thing that I really love, which I've touched on in the past few episodes, and I've come to realize myself, is because, when we think about uncertainty, there's a lot of fear behind that, right? We don't know what's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
We don't know what, so it brings this huge cloud of fear and doubt, like, oh, crap, I don't know what could happen. I don't know if that, it makes me uncomfortable. But now I've learned you have to embrace that uncertainty. And it sounds like that's what brought you to the next level and mindset wise, that uncertainty. And also another thing with the visualization.
And you literally embrace it, by the way. It's when you're going through it. And if you're aware of things, that's what gives you confidence. And now when I get that fear, I'm like, wait a minute, this means there's a big blessing behind it. And then when you think about it like that, all of a sudden that fear just kind of goes away.
That perspective shift is just, And then another thing is the visualization. Like window shopping, we see why you do it because then it makes you almost obsessed. Then you kind of rose your standards. So from that point, I would imagine that 100,000, it went higher.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But, a lot of people window shop and it almost makes them sad because they kind of see and they kind of get this disconnect from like what they can do and like reality sets in, but you could use it as a tool is what you're saying, definitely to
Oh, it was huge. And have you ever heard of the reticular activating system?
Yes, Ed Milet preaches on it a lot.
That's who I learned that from. And as I look back, I can tie the biggest decision I've ever made in my life back that changed my life for my entire trajectory. I can tie it back to the reticular activating system. For those of you that don't know, the reticular activating system is part of your subconscious mind, right? And your subconscious mind sees and catches all sensory information, but intentionally does not share it back to your conscious mind. This is so that your mind doesn't get overloaded, causing it to go to sleep. So instead, your subconscious mind only shares with you what's important to you. So your subconscious mind only filters what information it shares to the conscious mind. And it does this by the reticular activating system. So the reticular activating system is like a block, and it blocks everything your subconscious, everything it sees, and the only thing that it allows in to your conscious mind is anything related to survival. And at a young age, I needed $100,000 a year to survive. That's literally what I literally would get obsessed, and that's all I would think about every morning and every night when I would wake up. And the second part is your dreams and goals. So if your dreams aren't big enough, you won't even see them. So at 16 years old, I was already touching the dream, right? And then the last thing is your self-worth. So whatever you truly believe about yourself. So as I look back to the biggest decision that changed my entire trajectory, it was an easy decision, even though everyone was telling me not to take the plunge. For me, it was like, wait a minute, the only way I'm going to ever get to Hollywood Hills is not by making 70 grand. I got to make way more than that.
Yeah.
If I'm ever going to buy my mother her house, this is my opportunity. So my dreams and goals were big enough. So right away, I saw the opportunity, right? And then my self-worth was big enough too, because I had succeeded at different circumstances that now made me believe that I was that good, right? But if you never put yourself in those opportunities, you'll never believe.
Yeah. It's almost like a mind hack, it sounds like.
Totally.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite athletes, and I see it's probably your favorite athlete as well, is Kobe Bryant. What most people don't know about Kobe Bryant is that he's got the most missed shots record in NBA history, right?
Yeah.
Think about that. The reason he became so good is because he shot it. He was fearless. He just kept shooting and shooting and shooting. Well, if you shoot it enough, what ends up happening?
It's going to end up going, it's going to be like just routine.
It ends
up like
being
brushing your teeth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing that happened to me when I started my home security company. Is I just outworked everybody, and I knocked way more doors than anyone. And because of that, I was able to get results. Yeah. And the results gave me the confidence. But all I did was, there was people that were way more talented than I was.
Yeah.
Again, I was a very timid, shy kid, and I always had trouble articulating words, right? And I wasn't a natural. But I just outworked it until, boom, I would land one at 10:30 at night. And when I would get a deal at 10:30 at night, even though everybody else quit at 8, now my confidence rose. And the guy that quit at 8 o'clock and sat on the curve, his confidence doesn't stay there. His confidence actually drops every time he doesn't get it. But again, it's putting yourself in that uncertainty of like, I'm going to take the last shot, and I'm not afraid if I miss it that everyone's going to boo the hell out of me. Yeah. And again, just going back to Kobe Bryant, his rookie year, he missed 4 shots in a row. He airballed 4 shots in a row.
Yeah.
Right? And they lost that playoff game.
Yeah.
Most people would have never recovered from that. Yeah. They would have never wanted to shoot again.
Yeah.
Next year, he shoots it even more.
Yeah.
Then eventually, he starts making it. Confidence, boom. And that's a perfect example of putting yourself in situations that are worth more than you think you are.
It's crazy because people discredit Kobe because of his, his percentage of making the shots, but in reality, it served him. You know what I mean? And it, what you're talking about too with you, it seemed like it served you to building this confidence, especially at a very young age. And like you said, you couldn't articulate things, and you were young, and you were still kind of developing that I am worthy.
Yes,
you know what I mean. And you were such a young person, so it definitely sounded like it served you.
Definitely. And one of the mistakes that I made when I first started my home security company is that I didn't go all in. Okay. And what I mean by that is I figured out a way to convince my seniors at the time to change my time schedule so that I could work at the phone company from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. And then I would go knock on doors from 4 p.m. to 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. the first 10 days. And the reason that was a big mistake is it put me in a state of what I call low stress equals low performance. And the reason it was low stress for me is because I was still making $1,300 a week. So when I would go knock on doors, I didn't have the urgency, right? And what came out of that is I went 10 days without selling an alarm. And the only reason I stayed doing what I was doing was because my brother-in-law at the time was doing 2 sales a day. And I was like, man, if he can do it, I should be able to do it. Yeah. And the difference was he had fully resigned from the phone company that we worked at. I hadn't. And that's when I said I have to burn the ships. So finally, after 10 days of not selling, I went into the company that I worked for at the time and I resigned.
Wow.
And that was a Friday. And it's funny because...
How'd you feel when you did that?
Oh, I was scared to death.
Like, you knew you had to do it, but you were still scared, of course.
I was freaking out, man. But it's funny, all of a sudden, miraculously, what I couldn't memorize in 10 days, I memorized in 1 day. All of a sudden, I knew my presentation. All of a sudden, I knew all my rebuttals.
Yeah.
Everything that I was not learning at the time, I was able to do it. Why? Because I put myself in a situation, a pressure situation, that forced my necessity level, my urgency level to increase. And what came out of being in that state is that Monday, I got 5 sales in 1 day.
Dang.
And I made in 1 week, I made in 4 hours, no, actually 6 hours. I made in 6 hours what I used to make working 60 hours.
Dang.
And I remember that night I couldn't sleep because I was just like, man, imagine if I could make $1,500 every day like I just did the day before.
Yeah. You started seeing, like, you're shooting out all these opportunities and what you could attain.
Yeah, and I couldn't wait to go to work. And, that's the importance of leveraging the most amount of pressure on you so that you can produce at the highest level.
Yeah.
And sure enough, that week I ended up with 12 sales that week, and I was just, boom, I was excited. And then the next thing that I did that was, at the time, I call those things blessings because at the time I literally didn't know what I was doing. I was just working on instinct.
Yeah.
That week, I did something very, very important, which is I immediately went to an open house to go look at a home to buy my mother.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So even though I didn't have the money, I still went to the open house. And that was important because at the open house, they gave me a blueprint on what I needed to do to buy the house.
Yeah.
And I remember when they gave me this blueprint, I was like, that's it? Because at 21 years old, you're sort of told that, wait, you're too young to buy a house. You need a college degree if you want a house.
Yeah, like buying a house is like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, you need to be a smart dude, and you better have a bunch of money saved before you even look at it.
You need to be a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. Yeah.
So I went to this open house, and I'm like, $14,000 down payment? That's the only thing? Because, first time buyer, all you need is 3% down. And I was like, that's all I need? And then $1,400 payment. I was like, that's it. I make that in a day.
Yeah.
And then what I did after that is I was so excited that I immediately went back home, grabbed my mom, drove her to the house. And now I said to my mom, this home is going to be yours in 90 days. I promise you. And it's not this one. It'll look just like it.
Yeah.
And she starts crying because this was her dream. This was her biggest fight that she always had with my dad, is we never owned our own house because we couldn't show where the money was coming from. So all the fights I heard as a kid was, why can't we ever have our own house?
Yeah.
So this why for me was huge. And I told her in 90 days this was going to be her house. So now I had fully committed, right? No way back. I wasn't going to let the most important person down in my life.
Absolutely.
And because of that, I was able to sustain a level of excellence, knocking doors for 90 days, because I gave myself 90 days. So then I just did the math. I'm like, okay, my bills every month are $4,000. I need to save another $4,000 for the IRS and for the savings.
Okay.
And then my other 30% was going to go towards buying the house.
So you dissected it.
I dissected it. And I always call it, you chop it up to the ridiculous. The more you chop up that blueprint, the more realistic, the more attainable, the more attainable, the more excited you get about getting it, right?
I hope everyone's listening to this.
And then all that's left is you setting the date on when you want to have it by.
Yeah.
And that's where most people fail, is they don't put a date on when they're going to hit it by.
Yeah, there's no target date.
There's no target. And then
deadline.
When you set the date, you have to go after it.
Yeah.
Like your life depends on it.
Yeah.
Right? And you have to understand that right before you're going to get your blessing, you're probably going to get punched in the face by this thing called life.
Yeah.
It's going to knock you down. And it's at that point where your faith's going to be tested.
Yeah.
And that's when you immediately need to spring back up, push forward, and only focus on what you can control. And all that other stuff that is out of your control, you just leave that up to me, God, to people, the universe, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And God will start putting the right people in place to make that impossible into a possible, right? And again, that was huge for me because now I knew exactly what I needed to do. I needed to get 10 to 12 deals a week, 8 to 12 deals a week. And if I could do that for 90 days, then my mom would have her house. So that first week, I did 12 sales, and I think I made over $6,000. If I wouldn't have gone out and found my why, the next week I wouldn't have had the urgency
to get that,
to continue to work at the level that I was working, right? Because then complacency sets in, right?
Yeah.
When you don't know what you're working for, you're like, man, I just made $6,000 in 1 week.
I'm gonna go spend it.
Or better yet, I already paid my bill, so I'm gonna chill. Like, my bills are paid for already. Let me go hang out with my friends.
Yeah.
Right? And what happens is if you don't find a why, then your why will become your bills. And that's why it's not a coincidence that every month, at the end of the month, you figure out how to pay your bills. Right? It's because that's what you know. But if you actually went out of your way, which would mean getting yourself in uncertainty, right? Putting yourself in uncertainty.
Yeah.
If you actually went out of your way to figure out what else you can have in life, you could have whatever you want. And I know it sounds cliche, but that literally is it. You just need to find out what it is that you want.
Yeah.
Start chopping it up to the ridiculous. It'll become realistic. It'll become attainable. You'll get excited. And that is the reason I did not quit at 8 o'clock. Right? When everyone else quit, I kept on knocking. Then all of a sudden, 10:30 at night, boom, I would get a deal. Now my confidence, boom, increased. And after 90 days, I began to believe in my heart that I was always going to get a deal.
Yeah.
So when it was 7, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and everybody was telling me no, I already knew the deal was coming. It was just
deal's coming, like no matter what. Yeah.
So that formula, now I'm going to break you down what I just talked about, but in a formula. What I just did there is I call it the abundance way of thinking.
Okay.
There's the scarcity way of thinking, right? And everyone, I've used this formula to attain everything I've gotten in life. And everybody knows this formula. The problem is that 99% of the people misapply it. See, most people wait to have to then take action, to then become whatever it is that they want to become. So let's use buying a house as an example. Most people wait to save $80,000 to then finally go to the open house, to then finally become a homeowner. And the problem with this type of thinking is that it's related to having a low self-worth, and it's related to having a bad relationship with money. You see, if you're always worried about not having enough money, if you're always worried about not saving enough money, then you will begin to hoard all of your money.
Yeah.
And when you hoard all of your money, you're going to try to save every little penny you have. And now what develops is a mindset of scarcity, and also you don't reward yourself. And if you don't reward yourself, you won't touch the dream. And if you won't touch the dream, you won't get excited, right, to go outwork anyone or outperform anyone.
You won't kind of have a why, basically.
Exactly. So then what happens is you'll get complacent, which then means you'll start to coast through life, hoping that one day you'll have enough money to finally take action to become whatever it is that you want to become. And the chances of that happening are slim to none. What will happen is life's going to punch you in the face, knock you down, and it's probably going to take most of your savings when it does, if not all of your savings. And then you have to start from scratch this vicious cycle that is an endless cycle of of waiting to have enough money to finally take action.
It's almost as if you dug yourself a deeper hole.
Totally.
Yeah.
Now the mindset that you're supposed to have is flipped first is you become. So instead of being at the top, first you become. And becoming is everything that we've been talking about, right? Mm-hmm. Becoming is having faith, right? Having faith is taking action mm-hmm. before you get what you want. Mm-hmm. Becoming is believing in yourself. It's building your self-worth by putting yourself in situations that demand more than you think mm-hmm. you are worth, right? And the only way that that'll ever happen is by attacking your fears, mm-hmm. by putting yourself in that uncertainty, mm-hmm. right? Because we have to believe something in our heart mm-hmm. before we have it.
Yeah.
Right? And the only way you'll experience it is by attacking your fears. Now, once you become, you take action before you have the money because you realize you're a money-making machine. Mm-hmm. The money's on its way. Yeah. And once you take the action, you take the blueprint, you chop it up to the ridiculous, and then you put the date on when you want it by. And that's exactly what I did. Because I had become, I didn't need the money. All I knew is I declared in my heart that I was a homeowner. Mm-hmm. And I declared in my heart that I was worth at least at the time $100,000 a year. Mm-hmm. And the reason that was important is because I got a lot of resistance when I went to that open house that weekend. Mm-hmm. My own friends were like, dude, what are you doing? Relax. Like, yeah, you made $6,000.
They're like questioning you. Yeah.
Yeah, you made $6,000 this week, but what makes you think you're going to continue making that type of money?
Yeah.
Buying a house is a 30-year commitment, man. You don't even have a college degree. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And my reply to that was, yeah, but I'm worth $100,000 a year. Like, it doesn't matter what happens to my business. Mm-hmm. No matter where I go, I'm going to end up at the top again.
I love it, man.
And that's me becoming, right?
Yeah.
So first you have to become, and if you become, then you could easily take action before you have what you think you need. And then it's just about putting the date, which is have.
Yeah. It sounds like almost to what you were talking about. It's almost like it's almost like someone who's had a lot of food. They hunted, had a lot of food, and then they ran out. Now they have to go hunt again. Like they put themselves in that, that sense of urgency.
That pressure situation.
Yeah, that mm-hmm. pressure situation. What would you be? I'm curious to know though, from an outside perspective, for people who don't have that, haven't shifted their mindset. What would you say to somebody who says, well, what if I put myself in a pressure situation and I don't handle pressure well?
Excellent. Good question. So first of all, for that formula to work, you have to have 5 characteristics, right? Okay. Number 1, you have to have unwavering faith. Number 2 is you have to have massive work ethic. Number 3, you got to have self-discipline. Mm-hmm. And that's where most people fail, especially those people that are in commission-only jobs. The mm-hmm. reason they fail is because they have total freedom and they don't know how to self-discipline themselves. 4th one is you got to realize you got to go through perseverance. And perseverance you're not born with. You got to build it. And the way you build it is by falling on your butt and springing back up.
Yeah, keep going.
And then the last one, which I think will answer your question, is you got to have integrity. So you have to keep the promises that you make to yourself.
Yeah.
And that is what gives us the confidence, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why, we have to make sure that our unconscious mind and our conscious mind align, mm-hmm. right? Because your conscious mind can say, yep, I'm going to go do this, right? But your unconscious mind that's the prover, right? That's the one that knows what you really are all about.
Yeah.
And what happens is your unconscious mind starts thinking about all the times you never come through on your word, mm-hmm. right? Now, it doesn't want to hurt you, so it'll just justify why you can't do what you said you were going to do.
Yeah.
So at the time, you're saying, oh yeah, in 90 days, I'm going to do this, right?
Yeah.
Your unconscious mind is literally saying, yeah, you're full of shit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So then when you don't do it, you just have an excuse on why you didn't do it. Mm-hmm. So to answer your question, does it work for everybody? No, because if you've never kept the promises you made to yourself, you're probably not going to come through on this promise that you're making right now. Mm-hmm. So how do you do that? By collecting small wins.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah.
Start stacking little wins. And you might have never kept the promises you made to yourself before, but now anything you say you're going to do, hey, I'm going to go to EJ's house today at 11 a.m., even if I don't feel like it, there's no way I'm going to miss that appointment. I could easily make up a story on why I can't, but I'm going. Because that's when I say I'm going to do something, I always do
I got to do it, yeah.
Now your mind starts to believe, wait a minute, this guy's word does mean something. And then when you do that, then you could put yourself in those pressure situations because you know that you're always going to come through.
I love it. So like those little wins, it could be something small, but those little wins will eventually lead to you obtaining that big win, that big why. Yeah.
My life was just a stack of small little wins. Like from 15 to 21, it was a big period in my life where I just started stacking up little wins, and I started to, whenever that fear would come in, doubt would come in, I would go back. You know, we talked about this earlier. You went through it as well.
Yeah.
You sort of go back to that special moment where you did something that you didn't think you could do, right?
Yeah, yeah.
To just kind of get your confidence back.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just you focus on the little wins, and then once you'll know when it's time, and you'll know when you're ready. You know.
It's so it also sounds like you're able to get the house though. Going back.
I was, yeah. So I was able to get the house.
How was that? How was that with your mom?
Oh, one of the best feelings in the world.
I bet.
Yeah, and it also just gave me the confidence that
it boosted it up.
Again, the self-worth, boom, goes up a little.
Yeah.
Right, and then just continued going up, and then 3 years later, I bought her a new one, this one had a pool. Nice. I upgraded her, and then 2 years after that, I bought my own house. And that was like a dream home at the time, and every little time I did something, it just my self-worth would increase. But now I was also excited about going to work because I'm like, wait a minute, this is why I work so hard, is that I'm able to give back.
Yeah. Well, so it also sounds like too, you eventually emerged into a leader, right? Because you started training people and all that stuff. Was it hard to emerge as a leader being that young? Because you were still young relatively at the time, and then you were talking about how you're still building your self-worth. You were still trying to find that I am worthy. You know what I mean? You still had it, and you were still building. Was it hard to emerge as a leader at that time?
At the time, I was a manager for such a long time that it was sort of easy for me at the time. But it was always this mentality of, again, putting myself in a pressure situation. I remember one of the first things that I also did when I first started my company is I bought a minivan. Because what we do is we go door to door, right? Yeah. And typically you need a minivan to take all your 12 guys that are with you door knocking.
Your employees, yeah.
And even though I didn't have the employees at the time, I bought the minivan first. See, most people wait to have the employees to then go buy the minivan. I did the opposite.
You've been reverse engineering almost everything.
Everything, yeah. Literally, because by buying the van, it put me in a pressure situation where I'm like, oh, shoot, now I need to fill this van up because at 21 years old, I didn't want to just drive a minivan to drive it.
I better get these people in here.
I'm if I'm going to have it, it's because I'm going to have people. But it caused me to go work and find the people. And same thing, 10 years later, I decided that I wanted to take my business to a whole different level, and I needed to reinvest back into the organization because I always invested in the sales guys, but I never invested back into the organization to actually grow it. Yeah. And it took me 10 years, but I brought in a CFO. Nice. Now I invested $150,000. Again, now I'm like, I did that before I actually had the sales, but I knew the sales were coming, right? Nice. So I got the CFO. We went from 6 office employees to 50 within a year, which was another investment. That pressure situation made me work my butt off to go find even more recruits. Yeah. And there we go. And then we just started building it from there. But it took that investment into a CFO, or I would have never been there. And in 2009, when I declared, I'm going to take this company from 250 sales a month to 2,000.
Wow.
I had no idea on how that was going to happen. I just knew the why I was going to do it. And I also knew my strengths. I knew that I could lead. I knew that I could train. I knew that I could recruit. And I knew that I could sell. That's all I was good at. All that other stuff that I didn't know about, I just said, God's going to put the right person in front of me to make that happen. Mm-hmm. But I had no idea how I was going to go from 6 office employees to now we have over 100. How I was going to go from one state, now we're in over 35 states.
Wow.
How we were going to go from 8 installers to now 180 installers. Mm-hmm. No idea. Mm-hmm. I just knew my strengths.
Yeah.
And I started focusing on that. And little by little, just God started putting the right people in front of me to make that impossible into a possible. And here we are today. We're doing all those things that I declared back 10 years ago.
Uh-huh. Is from your experience, just from everything you've been through, do you feel like leadership is kind of something you're born into, or is it something that you have to emerge into?
I think you can definitely learn it if you start becoming aware of what makes a good leader.
Okay.
For me, it was instinct. Mm-hmm. To become a good leader, you have to serve people first. Mm-hmm. And again, I did that sort of by instinct, mm-hmm. right? If you add value to people, then you're going to influence people, mm-hmm. right? And if you influence people, then you could lead people.
Yeah.
So instead of thinking, man, how can I get Ejay to follow me? All I got to say is, hey, Ejay, is there anything I could do for you? How can I add value to you?
Mm-hmm. Be of value to the person, right?
Mm-hmm. And in my business, especially, I've always looked at my sales guys. I need to feed them first before I feed myself.
Mm-hmm. So right? you put your company first and your employees first before you.
All the time.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, there's times where I know I was right, and I know they were wrong, but I could just read that they just didn't understand it at the time.
Yeah.
So I let them slide and said, okay, I'm going to give you a chance this time, but if this happens again, mm-hmm. you can't tell me you didn't know.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I might have lost $1,000 on it, but I can't tell you how many times I've seen owners of companies lose one of their top guys over ego.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? And yeah, you saved $1,000, but you just cost yourself hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, when you're trying to do something long term, you don't need to. You can take your time with it, mm-hmm. And I am where I am today just by making decent money for a long time. You make decent money for 20 years, it becomes a lot of money.
Yeah, yeah,
but,
yeah.
I've been able to always have that mindset of let me put my people in front of me before I think of myself. So that's obviously key. You also, for me, you got to lead by example. Mm-hmm. You can't
walk the walk.
Right? You got to walk the walk. You can't tell someone to do something you're not willing to do. Mm-hmm. So that's also a big part of leading, and especially when you're starting your own company, man, you got to show people, and you got to understand what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Because as long as you understand how to do it, you'll always be in control. Mm-hmm. If you don't ever take the time to understand how to truly control your company, then you're never going to be in control. Mm-hmm. Because that person that you might have got lucky on by hiring, eventually is going to realize you don't know what the hell you're doing. He's mm-hmm. going to leave you.
And they're going to take over.
Exactly. They're going to take over.
Yeah.
And again, the other thing I could tell you is if you're not growing, your company's going to cease to exist because they'll either get recruited by somebody that is growing mm-hmm. or they'll quit.
Yeah.
Right? Because nothing stays the same. You're either getting better or you're getting worse. Mm-hmm. And when people see that you're not growing anymore, you're going to make them die off as well. Mm-hmm.
It's just going to like rub off on them almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you have to continue to grow.
Mm-hmm. Being that it's a security management, were you always tied in? Is there like a story behind how you got into security, or was it just really the sales part and just
No, it's funny. The reason I got into home security was because of that VP had this opportunity for me. Yeah. But I never looked at it until he told me about it.
Yeah.
And then it sort of made sense. What I loved about what we do for a living, even today and back then, was that it's the only high commission paying job that I know of that you can learn within a week mm-hmm. and that you can get trained, and that you can get paid within a week. Because there's a lot of high commission paying jobs out there, but it takes you 6 months to a year to learn it.
Forever.
And a lot of people don't have the time.
Don't have that time.
To wait a year to finally make money.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love about what we do now and what we did back then is we were able to change lives, right? Because once we taught them the mindset, they could easily in 1 week get trained, get paid within a week. And then the other beauty is it's a high commission paying job that you can scale.
Mm-hmm.
See, most high commission jobs, it's hard to scale.
Mm-hmm.
And ours, I mean, our top guys do like 6 sales a week, right? And those guys get paid $700 a deal.
Mm-hmm.
So in a day, they'll make like $4,500, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when they're on the door, they'll know in 2 minutes if the client wants it. Because what we do is we give away the alarm system at no cost, and then the customer just pays the monthly monitoring of about $54. And the reason we were able to do that is because most people that get the service don't cancel it until 10 years later, minimum.
Yeah.
So we get our money back within 3 years, and then after that, we get to keep that residual. So that's why we're able to pay the kind of money that we pay. But now, you know, especially now that everybody's got access to mindset, I feel like we're creating an environment where people are unleashed to fulfill their God-given potential.
Or people want to be involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love it now because we can literally take, you know, just 2 months ago, we took 2 homeless people, and within their first week, they made $2,500.
Wow.
Each.
Life-changing.
Now you could change people's lives. And that's what I loved about what I was first doing in the first 10 years that I was doing is I could see somebody making $8 an hour and then just see them change their entire life by teaching them these things, right? This people skill that I think could be taught. I didn't have the people skill, I think, at a very young age, but I was sort of taught, and I taught myself by just being out there and realizing that this was my only shot. If I ever wanted to make the type of money that I wanted to make, I had to use my people skill.
Yeah.
And I just love being able to provide that opportunity for people now.
It sounds like it was an opportunity, right? Because your VP guy, right? He was leaving.
He was the VP, so he's the one that had the idea to start the company.
Yeah. So it sounded like an opportunity, but then also it sounded like you were attracted to the market. The market also, then now it's like the culture and like what you're able to provide for these, you know, your new employees and how you're able to change lives and the mindset. That's amazing, man.
Yeah. And now we're a leadership development company that's disguised as a smart home security company. But at the core, we're really a leadership development company. And the idea is if we can do that, then we're going to make people a better version of themselves. And if we could do that, then they're unstoppable.
Their own parables, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go.
Let's go, yeah.
That's funny. You know, I wanted to ask you too, because it seems like there was different kind of phases in your life, maybe not phases, but different shifts, right? And
totally
every so often, it happened. Almost like your why almost evolved or changed. Does it ever seem like you might run out of a why, or like it might be there might be too many whys? Like, you know, some people have a big open mind and just like looking at this and that. Is it safe to say that you kind of your whys have evolved, but you stuck to that one first, and then when it evolved, you went after that new one?
Yeah, you know, it's funny with me. Again, I started pretty young, 21 years old.
Yeah.
So I can tell you that at first, it was all about materialistic things, right? And again, you're 21 years old, right? At 21 years old, you're not really thinking of donating a bunch of money.
Yeah.
I mean, people might say that, but at least for me, I wasn't thinking of donating anything.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want this.
I like the honesty, man. Yeah,
right?
that's true.
I'm like, I want this. And then eventually you get all these things. And then you start realizing like, okay, this made me happy.
Did it fulfill you though? Is that
It does, but eventually you'll lose that happiness. Sort of fades because you've already accomplished, and now you have to find a new why.
Gotcha.
Right? And then you do that, and then you do that. But eventually you'll realize that what really gives you joy and total fulfillment is being able to serve people, right? So for me, it was great that I was materialistic for so many years because then I got hooked on the growing part. It wasn't about the materialistic part. It's how can I improve myself, right? And then different whys would come in at different times. So like for me in 2009, the why became I need to make sure that I take care of my office employees that got me to this point. And the only way I could ever take care of them is if I grow to a big company. Because I want to retire all of them. Because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have been able to accomplish what I did in those first 10 years.
Yeah.
And I wasn't thinking of me anymore. I was like, how can I give back to them? And this is what I got to take on more. And that drove me. It was, how do I build a company where one day I'm going to be able to retire all of them, right? I wanted to be like the U.S. Postal Office or law enforcement, where one day, hey, you worked here 25 years, you don't have to work a day in your life again.
Yeah.
Right? And that wasn't going to happen unless I grew. So and I actually have a perfect formula, another formula that works with that. And I call that the game of life. It's a formula that I call the game of life. And I look at life as a game, and you have to play to win it. It's actually a pretty simple formula. The formula consists of a balance of three things. You have to have purposes, problems, and what we call restricted freedom. And purposes, these are your dreams and goals. Those are the things that keep you alive in life and give you happiness, right? Problems, believe it or not, also keep you alive and give you happiness. Because in order to grow, we need resistance.
We need problems.
We need problems. That's the only way we're going to grow, right? So when you know that, you embrace them, right? Because if you didn't have problems, you would get bored of the game of life. So let's just use the game of basketball as an example. If I were to play you one-on-one basketball and I continue to beat you 15-0, I might have fun for the first couple of games, but after a while I'm going to be like, hey, Ejay, man, I don't want to play you anymore.
Yeah.
Why? Because we need to get challenged. We need resistance. And I can tell you that most people that are probably stagnant in their life right now, it's because they haven't challenged themselves. They've probably gotten so good at what they're at, and they haven't tried to improve, that they're just stagnant. And what will happen with that is they'll start to decline because they're doing things. I call it, you can do things with your eyes closed. Once you get to that level, you better find a new goal, right?
Yeah.
And now the last part of that is what we call restricted freedom. And that's where you get to celebrate your accomplishment and be present in your accomplishment so that you can be fulfilled. So that's a very important part too. You have to celebrate it and you have to be present.
This is like everything we were talking about earlier.
Right, because if what was happening to me, I was celebrating, but I wasn't present because I was already thinking of my next accomplishment.
Gotcha. You're already looking forward, being that visionary and being that.
And the problem with that is then you'll become a successful person that's not fulfilled. You have to be present in those moments when you accomplish things. Now, similar to purposes and problems, we also need restricted freedom. Because if we had total freedom, which is what most people, or the misconception is that we want total freedom. Total freedom is the absolute worst thing that could happen to you. Because if you had total freedom, then you wouldn't have purposes, which means then you wouldn't have problems, which then means you can't solve anything.
You don't have that urgency that we were talking about.
And you can't solve anything. And we as humans, we were put on earth to create. So if we're not creating, then what happens is we'll start to get anxiety. We'll start to go stir crazy a little bit, and we'll start to get depressed, right? And that's why sometimes you'll see people that have all the money in the world, and now they're miserable. It's because they stopped creating, right? And it's because they stopped creating. And I believe that our body is a unit of energy, and the way we get energy is not by drinking coffee and energy drinks. I mean, that helps, but what gives us energy is completing tasks, is getting things done. I can tell you that I've had 15-hour days, and I complete a bunch of tasks. I come home with so much energy, my wife can't even shut me up. And then there's times where I'll work 15-hour days and I work on a bunch of projects and I don't get anything done. And I come home and I'm just depleted of all energy. And that's because I didn't get anything done. And see, in life, the most important thing is you have to have energy, because if you don't have energy, you won't be able to you won't be able to accomplish squat. You're not going to be a good father if you come home with no energy.
Yeah.
You're not going to be a good husband.
Yeah.
You're not going to be a good businessman. So we need to get energy, and we do that by completing tasks. So just a quick recap: you got to have purposes. Purposes always comes with problems. The bigger the purpose, the bigger the problem, and your job is to solve it. In fact, it's a spiritual law, basically. It's like a yin and yang. They're together. Purposes, problems, always together. Our job is to solve it, and then once we solve it, we celebrate, and then we are present, and then after we're present and we celebrate for a while, you better find a new purpose. Because if you don't find a new purpose, you'll start to self-sabotage and mess up your life.
It sounds like a brother and sister fighting and trying to resolve. Like, yeah, they need to come together. And you know what's funny is that you bring that up about humans, right? Well, there's that saying. What is it, Edwin? It's humans are not meant to consume, but they're meant to create.
Yep.
Right. And the more that you create, the more that you're able to challenge yourself and keep doing all that stuff.
And if you can do that in all areas of your life, Ejay. So there's 4 areas of my life that I try to work on, which is my faith, my fitness, and that's body and mind.
Yeah.
My family, and my finances. You're gonna do pretty well, right? Yeah. And let me just say, there's no such thing as balance. If you want to be great at something, you have to get obsessed on that, and it's probably going to take most of your time. And that means that these other areas of your life you're going to have to sacrifice them.
Yeah.
The good news is that in life, at different times of your life, different areas will spike.
Yeah.
And what you got to be aware of is whatever area of your life is spiking, not to let the other areas die off. Because remember, all you need to do is improve a little bit in those other areas. Doesn't mean you have to put all your time into them, but just continue to work on them and improve on them, and just put some time into it.
Yeah.
What most people unfortunately do is they get obsessed with something, whether it's business, and then they forget about everything else.
Then like the family die. Yeah.
Family, they let because they don't work on the family anymore. They don't work on their fitness. And here's the thing. If you don't do something for a long time, you're going to start to dislike it.
Yeah.
If you don't work on your marriage or family, you're going to start to dislike them. Right? If you don't work on your mind, you're going to start to hate your, studying. If you don't work on your fitness, if you haven't gone to the gym in the last 18 years, I can guarantee you probably hate the gym.
That first day is going to suck.
Right?
Yeah.
So again, the idea is nothing's going to be, there's no such thing as balance, but just remember to continue to improve a tiny little bit. So even if you don't have time to work out right now because you're spiking in business, just 15 minutes a day, go run around your home, right? And then the next week, go to 17 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever. You just start improving little by little. You don't try to go work out for 2 hours, and then not hit the gym for the next 2 weeks.
Even if it's just like 1% of doing just little by little. Exactly. Like walk your dog or something. Yeah.
Read a book. Just read a page. That's how I did it. I went 19 years without studying. So what made me very successful is from 15 years old to 21 years old, the company that I worked for at the time, the phone company, they used to make us study for an hour before we would get on the phones to sell. And we studied communication courses, mindset courses, sales courses. And I attribute a lot of my success to that. But when I started my own company at 21 years old, now I had total freedom, which is not good.
Yeah.
With total freedom, I'm like, I don't got to study anymore. So then I went 19 years without picking up a book, without listening to a podcast. And it ended up hurting me really bad about 3 years ago. Because in 2016, I finally surpassed, for the first time in my life, what I thought I was worth. You see, I always had, I hate using the word trick my mind, but I justified doing well by outworking people.
Yeah.
And as long as I knew I was outworking you, it gave me the confidence that I was going to do better than you.
Yeah.
But eventually, the company got to a certain point, and it got so big that it wasn't about outworking people. Now, what I had suppressed for a long time in my life, which was I wasn't smart enough, because ever since I was a kid, the school system told me I wasn't smart. All those doubts started to resurface.
So you had to adapt, and you had to go back and start reading.
I had to start reading because I was like, oh, I know what the problem is. The reason I'm feeling this way, like I'm not worthy to be here. And funny enough, I started to self-sabotage, right? Because when you don't think you're worth something, you'll figure out a way to F it up to bring you back down to what you really think you're worth.
Almost like make excuses.
Yep. Yeah. So the company did so well that I subconsciously I was doing, but I didn't know I was doing it. I was self-sabotaging the company to come back down to what I thought I was worth. And then I realized, wait a minute, you got to attack this fear. Going back to attacking your fears. My fear was that I would pick up a book and it would remind me of how stupid I was, because I am that person I was that person, not anymore, where I would read a page and I'd have to read it like 4 or 5 times because I couldn't understand it.
Go back and
go back. What the hell did I just read?
Yeah.
And at first, so then I committed to just studying an hour a day, the same way I committed to my fitness, because I've been doing fitness for 18 years, since I was 18 years old, so actually more like 20, whatever that is nowadays. But working out is easy to me, right? And, you're not always going to be motivated. You're not always going to be inspired. What will get you through those days when you're not motivated and inspired is your routine, your habits.
You made it into a habit, yeah.
So I made my physical workout into a habit. I could always do it no matter how shitty I feel. And that's the difference between an elite to an average person. Anybody can do things when things are going well. It's when you don't feel that great, can you still get the job done? And that's when you rely on the habits and routines. So I wanted to get my mind to that point as well. So I started to focus on studying an hour a day. And like I was just saying, at first, I'd only last like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was reading, but I stayed committed. And I went from 10 minutes to 15 minutes to 20 minutes.
There you go.
And I finally got to that hour. And it was a struggle, right? Anytime you attack your fears, you're going to get all this resistance. And I remember the resistance that came with reading for me. It was like I couldn't understand it. I just force myself. And these, I call it considerations would come in my mind. That's your inner voice that could be good or bad. Yeah, you don't have time, dude. You're too busy. You don't have time to be spending an hour. So I had to start waking up at 4:30 in the morning. And again, sacrifice.
Yeah.
Stop watching Sports Center. I literally, because that was the only really TV that I watched.
Yeah.
Now, I'll maybe watch an hour of TV a week. Whereas before I was probably spending 7-8 hours of TV. Now I've sacrificed that to work on my mind.
Definitely just attack it head on.
Yeah. And like anything, at first, once you do it, you start getting curious about it and you start excited about it. And I remember first picking up that book, 10X. And once I picked it up and I read the whole thing, I was like, wait a minute. Everything that's on this book is everything that I've done in my life. I just didn't know how to articulate it. Yeah. And when I realized that, I got excited. So I started, looking at other people that I loved as far as their content. I started studying different people, and I started noticing, wait a minute, they're all talking about the same thing, which is everything that I've done. So now I started to believe in my heart that I was worth hundreds of millions of dollars, because the guys that were $100 million and billions of dollars were all talking about the same thing.
It's like, I'm like them, but no way, they're like me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So now my self-worth went through the roof. Yeah. And since then, my company's been on a trajectory where we're just blowing it up right now. But it took me having to go through that struggle, my own struggle. And we're all going to have to go through some struggles at times. And when it does, instead of procrastinating on it, you got to attack it. Whenever you're worried about something, it's very simple. Yeah. Attack that worry, and it goes away. The problem is people, when they're worried about something, they don't want to face that fear, so they'll procrastinate it. And it's just a short-sighted attempt to postpone discomfort.
It's almost like it's attacking you, but if you attack it first, then it'll be fine. Yeah,
it's fine. And again, it's just people want to postpone the discomfort. They don't want to go through that discomfort. I'll deal with it later. Yeah, and then you have all this anxiety that you shouldn't even have.
Yeah.
Because if you would just attack the freaking problem, that anxiety goes away.
Yeah.
You know, and doesn't mean you're going to solve the problem right away, but as soon as you know that you're attacking that problem or that worry, I promise you that anxiety just goes away.
Yeah, dude, I love it. So Edwin, we're about to end very shortly. I think one thing, you talked about it a lot, but I wanted to kind of pick your brain here a little bit on, what do you, in your mind, just everything we talked about, and you shed a lot of light on it, but just to drive it in, we talked about attacking, getting out of your comfort zone, embracing the uncertainty. What do you think has helped you become the high performer you are? Because it sounds like obviously none of this would have all happened unless you really almost became obsessed, or you became almost like a psycho worker. You know what I mean? It's safe to say. What really makes somebody, or could help somebody become a high performer?
I mean, it starts with you really wanting it.
Yeah.
And see, a lot of people say they want it, but they don't really want it.
Yeah.
It's funny. I wanted a certain type of lifestyle, and I needed it. Mm-hmm. And I've seen people that say it, but they don't want it. Like, I've had people stay at one of my houses before that sort of, what's the best word to say it? They sort of came from the hood, right? And let them stay there for a while. Beautiful house. And I'd go check in on them. They always had it a mess. Mm-hmm. So even though they were living in this beautiful home, they were, even though it was in a great area, they were still treating it as if they were in the hood, mm-hmm. right? So they could say all they want that lifestyle, but in reality, they don't.
Yeah.
They're perfectly fine in the mess.
Yeah.
And, you need to hate something really bad to finally want to do something about it. And I still remember the day that I decided that I wasn't going to live like that anymore. Mm-hmm. I was in bed, and I was 21 years old that same week where I got those 12 sales. Mm-hmm. What made me go to the open house.
The open house, day, for the house.
Obviously, one reason was obviously my mom, but the other reason is I got woken up one last time by a cockroach. And I said, this is the last time this shit happens to me.
Man.
And I remember springing back up out of bed and running towards the sink and just washing my face. Because it literally wasn't my face. Mm-hmm. And I just remember turning on the lights and saying, you know what, F this. I'm not a freaking renter. Yeah. I'm an owner.
Yeah.
And I'm going to take control of my situation. And I'm going to go get a house. I finally was done with that type of living.
Yeah.
So that's where it starts. And then it's about stacking the little wins. Mm-hmm. And I can't tell you how much stacking these little wins helped me out, man.
Yeah.
And knowing that I came through on my word so many times, time after time, that that helped me get to where I was at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it.
In fact, the first, I'll try to do it quick. The first time I knew that I did something when my whole life changed forever, that shift moment, that catalyst that changed my life.
Yeah, that turning point.
My entire life.
Yeah.
Has to do with a car again. Mm-hmm. This is my Eclipse story. Mm-hmm. And this is back in '96. You're probably too young back then, but back then, the car that everybody wanted at that age, in that 18-year-old age, was a Mitsubishi Eclipse. Mm-hmm. It had just came out. Mm-hmm. Man, I wanted this car so bad.
Yeah.
And for about 2 years, I was just saving every little penny I had towards it. But of course, I would always figure out a way to lose that money, mm-hmm. whether it was helping my family out with a family crisis or just a bad investment. I would always lose the money. Mm-hmm. So finally, I'm just like, man, screw this. I had a 240SX at the time, Nissan 240SX. I'm like, I'm just going to buy rims for this damn thing. Mm-hmm. And I bought these $3,000 rims for the NSX Nissan. Mm-hmm. And I figured if I put the rims on, it'll probably look just as nice as an Eclipse.
Mm-hmm. We're talking about the Paul Walker Eclipse, like the original from Fast and the Furious?
I think so. Yeah. It was the one with the big back, big butt.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I just love that car. And I remember I bought the rims. And believe it or not, yes, the rims cost more than the freaking car, right?
Okay.
But I figured that was my reward, right?
Yeah.
And of course, that same day I bought the rims, as I got home, I got carjacked at gunpoint.
Oh.
And literally my rims were gone. I found the car later, a week later, a week later, I found the car, and it was on blocks.
Stripped, yeah.
Fully stripped. And that same week, I got laid off from the phone company that I used to work at.
Oh, man.
And I remember that same day just driving home, and I was pissed off at everything and everyone. I was mad at my parents because I'm like, man, why did I have to support, like, why did I have to take on that responsibility? Yeah. I have nothing. I've been working my butt off for 4 years, and I have 3 years, and I have nothing to show for it.
You're just basically like mad at the world.
I'm mad at the world. And I remember passing through that Mitsubishi Eclipse dealership and saying to myself, man, I'll never be able to get this car, man. Mm-hmm. And then this inner voice started talking to me. Again, this could be good or bad, right? Mm-hmm. And this inner voice starts telling me, what the F are you so afraid of? Mm-hmm. Everywhere you've gone, you've always figured out a way to get to the top.
Yeah.
Go get your car now. Mm-hmm. And if you get it now, A, it's probably going to make you work harder. It's probably not going to want to make you sit on your unemployment check. And all these thoughts came to my head. Mm-hmm. And all I know is I immediately, next exit, got off, made a U-turn, went into the Mitsubishi dealership, and walked out of there with a $30,000 car.
Dang.
And no job.
Uh-huh.
And at the time, I just thought, man, I got some big balls. But now that I get to reflect on that, I became at that moment, right? I became... And I was no longer waiting to have. I actually said, wait a minute, I could have this. I do belong in this car because I know I'm going to get a job within the next 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And I know I'm going to make at least $1,000 a week because I know what I bring to the table.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know the money's on its way because I'm a money-making machine.
Yeah,
Next thing you know, a week later, I get a call from the phone company that I used to work for. They bring me back. They found a new position for me. And I actually got a promotion out of it. Now they even paid me more than what I was getting paid before.
Wow.
And that's when I realized, wait a minute, it's the mindset, right?
Yeah.
So many people are so worried and scared. No, I can't do it because what if this happens? Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what happens. If you've always been good and you've always kept the promises you made to yourself and you've always figured out a way to get things done. See, I just have grit, man. Mm-hmm. I'm scrappy. I figure out a way. I might not be the smartest freaking person, but I'm scrappy, man. I'll figure the shit out.
Yeah.
Some way, somehow, I solve problems. Mm-hmm. And I realized what that was worth. Mm-hmm. Since then, I've never been scared of getting anything in my life.
There you go, man. Limitless, man.
Limitless.
Yeah. Dude, I appreciate you.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on the parables, man. Dude, definitely one of my favorite episodes, man. Just so much to take in. I hope everybody kind of took notes, or maybe paused and went back 15 seconds, you know. But listen, guys, Parables Podcast with Edwin, my good friend, dude. I don't know if you've kind of seen my past episodes, but I only have legends sign my canvas, man. I'd be honored for you to sign it.
My honor.
Dude, I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Guys, if you guys find value out of this episode, please do me a favor and share it with somebody you think it could inspire. And in addition, if you're watching or listening, please tag me and Edwin. Let us know what you think. Because again, this episode was just amazing. Guys, website is up, www.theparables.podcast.com. And again, if you guys could share it with anybody, the mission here is to be of value to the world, and anybody who can find inspiration, motivation, whatever it may be out of this, and become the best version of them. That's all that we ask.
Yeah, and if you follow me on Tedwinator, DM me. I always get back to all my DMs. If you have any questions on anything that we talked about,
definitely.
Shoot.
And you have one more thing, just real quick. I almost feel like the battery's about to die.
Yeah.
So they could find you at Tedwinator.
Tedwinator.
Okay.
TEDWINATRO.
Yeah, then you have a website too, also?
Yeah, it's edwinarroyave.com.
Okay. And then lastly, you're doing a speaking engagement in July, yeah?
Yeah, I'm speaking with my favorite athlete of all time, Bryant.
Kobe.
That's in less than a month, or in a month. It's going to be exciting.
This episode will definitely be released before that. Yeah. And I plan to be there if everything works out with work. So I plan to be there, and I can't wait to hear you speak, man.
Yeah, it's great.
I appreciate you, brother.
Awesome.
Parables Podcast, we are out of here.